The email came late in the afternoon. PrimeTalk Live, one of the top-rated morning shows in the country, wanted Malcolm Reid, CEO of Reid Dynamics, to be a guest. The topic? Diversity in corporate leadership. Malcolm had seen this move before. A mainstream network suddenly interested in black success, rolling out an entrepreneur like a showpiece, only to pick them apart the moment the cameras rolled. His assistant, Jordan, didn't like it. She stood in his office, arms crossed, scrolling through the producer's bio. "Mal, this isn't just any morning show. Claire Withers is famous for her gotcha interviews. She doesn't bring people on to celebrate them. She brings them on to tear them down." Malcolm leaned back in his chair, thoughtful but calm. "Good. Then she's playing chess with the wrong guy." The next morning, Malcolm arrived at the studio. Everything felt clinical. The producer barely looked up from her clipboard as she greeted him. "Mr. Reid, thanks for being here. We'll mic you up in 5. No warmth, no casual small talk, just business. In the makeup chair, an assistant dusted powder on his face with quiet efficiency. On the studio monitor, a teaser flashed across the screen. Coming up next. Diversity or advantage? The new era of black business. Malcolm clenched his jaw. So that's the angle. They weren't here to highlight his success. They were here to question if he deserved it. When he walked onto the set, the illusion of warmth was perfectly staged. Soft lighting, neutral colors, a glass coffee table between him and Claire Withers. She smiled, professional and polished, but Malcolm recognized it instantly. It wasn't a smile of welcome. It was a smile of control. Malcolm Reid, CEO of Reid Dynamics, a true American success story. Thank you for being here. Appreciate the invite. She flipped through her cue cards. Let's talk about your company. You just landed one of the largest federal energy contracts in history, $300 million. That's impressive. Malcolm gave a small nod. We developed the most secure, scalable, and cost-efficient solution. Simple as that. Claire's posture didn't change, but Malcolm saw it. The shift, the moment before the knife slid in. Some have called it groundbreaking, a slight pause. But others have raised concerns. Here we go. There are claims that Reid Dynamics benefited from federal diversity initiatives, giving minority-owned businesses an unfair advantage. Some say this contract wasn't purely about merit, but about meeting a quota. How do you respond? Malcolm let the silence stretch just long enough to make people uncomfortable. Then he leaned forward slightly. "It's funny," he said. "When a black entrepreneur wins, people wonder if it was special treatment. But when legacy firms, run by the same families for generations, win those same contracts, no one questions it." The studio tensed. The producers behind the cameras exchanged glances. Claire kept her polished expression, but Malcolm caught it. A flicker of something. She wasn't expecting that answer. "So, you're saying race played no role at all in your success?" Malcolm exhaled through his nose, shaking his head with a low chuckle. "Did race play a role when Tesla got billions in subsidies? When Wall Street banks got bailed out? Or do we only ask that question when the CEO looks like me?" Claire's lips pressed together just for a second. A crack in the facade. She glanced at her notes, then back up. Her eyes sharpened. "Malcolm, let's talk about your background." Malcolm gave a slow nod. "Here it comes. You grew up in Detroit, single mother, public school, no Ivy League connections, yet somehow you beat out billion-dollar corporations for this contract. Some people might wonder..." She let the sentence hang. "How does someone like you pull that off?" The implication was clear. Who pulled the strings for you? Malcolm exhaled, shaking his head with a knowing smirk. "It's called work, Claire." The energy in the studio shifted again. "People like me don't inherit billion-dollar safety nets. We don't have family names that open doors before we walk through them. So we build, we grind, we outwork everyone else. And when we win, people like you sit across from us and ask how it happened." Silence. The control room wasn't cutting to commercial. They were letting this play out. Claire adjusted in her seat. "But surely you had help along the way," she pressed. "Maybe a mentor? A program? Something that gave you an edge?" Malcolm chuckled, low and dry. "Yeah, help came in the form of working 3 jobs while getting my engineering degree. Help came in the form of being turned down by investors 47 times before someone finally took a chance. That's the help I got." Another shift. Claire wasn't expecting him to be this direct. And then, just for a second, Malcolm caught something out of the corner of his eye. One of the producers whispered something into a headset. Another crew member exchanged a look with someone off set. Something was off. There was more to this than just a tough interview, and Malcolm was about to find out exactly what. Malcolm knew something was off. This wasn't just a tough interview, this was a setup. The way the producers moved, the way the crew whispered behind the cameras, The way Claire paced her questions, it was all too precise. Then came the moment. Claire flipped through her cue cards and delivered the question with the kind of careful neutrality that only meant trouble. Malcolm, your journey is remarkable, but let's talk about something that's raising questions. Your first major investment, $2 million, came from a private investor whose name has never been publicly disclosed. Why the secrecy? There it was. Malcolm barely blinked. They were building a narrative, one where his success wasn't earned, but given. They wanted doubt. When Elon Musk secured billions in government subsidies, did anyone ask who vouched for him? When Wall Street executives got bailed out, did anyone question their connections? Or do we only ask these things when the CEO looks like me? Claire's expression didn't change, but Malcolm saw it, a flicker of something in her eyes. She hadn't expected him to turn it around so fast. This isn't about them. It's about you. Malcolm exhaled through his nose, shaking his head slightly. No, Claire. It's about the system. When a black entrepreneur secures capital, it's a mystery, a controversy. But when my competitors sit in private country clubs, shake hands with billionaires, and walk out with million-dollar deals, nobody bats an eye. The tension shifted. A producer behind the cameras whispered into a headset. Malcolm could feel it. They didn't like where this was going. Then his phone buzzed. Jordan. Don't answer. You're being played. I found something. Malcolm took a slow breath. This wasn't just a setup. It was a full-blown smear campaign. Claire leaned in slightly, pressing forward. Malcolm, our research suggests that this unnamed investor had ties to government contracts long before Reid Dynamics secured its first major deal. Can you confirm or deny that? A trap. A loaded question, but Malcolm had the upper hand now. His phone buzzed again. I have the receipts. They lied. Check your email. Malcolm's pulse quickened. He tapped his phone discreetly. And there it was. A documented timeline proving that his investor had zero ties to government contracts before funding Reid Dynamics. The entire story Claire was pushing? A fabrication. He looked back at her, his face unreadable. You know what's funny? He said smoothly. Claire hesitated. You brought me here to question my integrity, but what happens when the real question is about yours? Silence. A pause. For the first time in the interview, Claire looked uncertain, and Malcolm knew. He had just won. The fallout begins. By the time Malcolm left the studio, the internet was already on fire. Clips of the interview flooded social media. Malcolm Reid just flipped the entire media game on live TV. The way he called them out? Legendary. This wasn't an interview. It was a hit job, and he exposed it, but not everyone was on his side. So predictable. Pulling the race card when things get tough. This guy just proved why no one trusts these so-called diversity hires. If you really earned it, why not answer the question? And then, the real bombshell dropped. Jordan burst into Malcolm's office hours later, her laptop open. Mal, you need to see this. She spun the screen around. A leaked internal memo from PrimeTalk Live's producers. It wasn't about an interview, it was about taking him down. And the battle was just beginning. Malcolm walked out of the studio, but the fight was far from over. His phone was blowing up. Messages, missed calls, emails, all coming in at once. He barely made it to his office before Jordan stormed in, laptop in hand, her face tense. Mal, you need to see this. She placed the laptop in front of him. The screen showed a leaked internal memo from PrimeTalk Live's producers. It wasn't about an honest interview, it was about a pre-planned takedown. Their whole segment was scripted before you even sat down. They wanted to discredit you, plant doubt, and spin a false narrative before you had a chance to defend yourself. Malcolm clenched his jaw. He had known this wasn't a fair fight, but seeing proof made it different. He scrolled through the document, names, strategies, even a list of talking points designed to push the idea that he had somehow cheated his way to success. Then another message came in, this time from an unknown number. You stepped into something bigger than you realize. Be careful who you trust. Malcolm stared at the screen. Jordan leaned over his shoulder, reading the message. What the hell does that mean? She whispered. Malcolm exhaled. He had one option now. Go on the offensive. Get me a meeting with our PR team and find out who leaked this memo. Jordan nodded, already dialing. Hours later, Malcolm sat in a boardroom with his executive team. Some were nervous, others were furious. The leaked memo had already hit the press. News outlets were picking it up. One of his top advisors shook his head. This is bad. If we respond too aggressively, they'll say we're trying to cover something up. If we stay silent, we let them control the narrative. Malcolm tapped his fingers on the table. We're not playing defense. We're going to show the world exactly what they tried to do. He turned to Jordan. Call every major outlet. We're doing a live press conference tomorrow. No scripts, no filters. They wanted to put me under a microscope. Let's shine a light on them instead. The next morning, the conference room was packed with reporters. Cameras rolled, microphones were positioned, and millions of people were tuned in. Malcolm stepped to the podium. I want to thank everyone for being here today. Normally, I'd be talking about innovation, progress, and the work we do at Reid Dynamics, but today I need to talk about something else. The truth. The room fell silent. Yesterday, I sat down for what was supposed to be an honest conversation. Instead, I walked into a setup, a scripted attack designed to discredit not just me, but every black entrepreneur who dares to succeed without permission. Screens behind him lit up, displaying the leaked PrimeTalk live memo. Gasps rippled through the audience. Reporters scrambled to take notes. Malcolm continued. This wasn't journalism. This was an attempt to manipulate public perception, to push the idea that people like me don't deserve a seat at the table. But here's the thing. I've never needed their permission to succeed. And I won't start now. The moment was raw, powerful. The internet exploded. Malcolm Reid just exposed the media on live TV. Legendary. He's not just defending himself. He's defending every entrepreneur who's had to fight twice as hard. This isn't just about him. This is about how the system works. But the backlash was just as strong. Classic deflection. If he has nothing to hide, why not answer the original questions? Playing the victim card, maybe he really did get unfair advantages. This proves why people don't trust woke CEOs. Then another twist. Jordan ran into Malcolm's office, her face pale. Mal, we found out who leaked the memo. She slid a folder onto his desk. Inside were emails, phone logs, a name he never expected. Someone inside PrimeTalk Live had intentionally leaked the truth, and they wanted to meet. Malcolm stared at the name, his mind racing. This wasn't over, not even close. Malcolm walked into the press conference knowing this was bigger than just defending himself. The cameras were on, the room was packed, and millions were watching. He adjusted the microphone, scanning the audience. This wasn't about one bad interview. This was about exposing how the system worked against people like him. He took a deep breath and spoke. I came here today to talk about more than just myself. Yesterday, I sat down for what was supposed to be an honest conversation. Instead, it was a staged attack, designed to discredit me and question whether I deserve my success. But what you don't know is that this wasn't just about me. It was part of a larger effort to control who gets to succeed and who doesn't. The room was silent. Reporters scribbled notes, cameras zoomed in. Malcolm turned to the screen behind him, where the leaked documents were displayed. These emails are between media executives and corporate leaders from industries I compete in. They didn't just plan an aggressive interview. They coordinated a strategy to ensure I would never win another major contract again. And it's not just me. This is how they operate. Every time a black entrepreneur breaks through, they move the goalposts. They shift the conversation from merit to quotas, from excellence to favoritism. They don't ask how legacy corporations keep winning, they only ask how we manage to beat them. The murmurs in the crowd grew. Some reporters exchanged glances. Others tapped frantically on their laptops. Malcolm wasn't done. They wanted this to be about me. They wanted to frame it as one man's controversy, but this is about a system that protects itself, that shuts out competition, that rigs the game while pretending the playing field is level, and today I'm making sure the world sees it. The room erupted. Journalists fired off questions. Networks cut into their regular programming to broadcast the conference live. Malcolm had flipped the narrative. He wasn't defending himself anymore, he was exposing them. Hours later, Jordan burst into his office, phone in hand. You're trending everywhere. Some outlets are calling it the biggest corporate scandal of the year. PrimeTalk Live just put out a statement. She held up her phone and read aloud. While we stand by our commitment to journalistic integrity, we acknowledge concerns regarding the framing of our recent segment with Malcolm Reid. We are reviewing our editorial practices to ensure fairness in future coverage. Malcolm shook his head. Damage control. Jordan smirked. And it's not working. Their sponsors are pulling ads. Their own audience is calling them out. Malcolm exhaled. The fight wasn't over, but they had won the first battle. His phone buzzed again. An unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. A voice on the other end. Low. Serious. You don't know what you started. Be careful. The line went dead. Malcolm stared at the screen. He wasn't just taking on one network. He had just gone up against something much bigger, and they weren't backing down. But neither was he. Malcolm put the phone down, his mind racing. He had expected backlash, but this was different. This wasn't just a smear campaign, it was a warning. Someone powerful didn't want him digging any deeper. He turned to Jordan, who had been watching him carefully. "Who was it?" she asked. Malcolm shook his head. "Didn't say a name. Just told me to be careful." Jordan's jaw tightened. That means we hit a nerve. Outside, the media storm was only growing. PrimeTalk Live was in full damage control mode, issuing another statement claiming they had no prior knowledge of any coordinated effort against Malcolm. But leaked emails told a different story. Other networks were now picking it up, dissecting how deep the connections ran between corporate executives and media figures working to control public perception. Malcolm wasn't just a story anymore. He was the story. That night, he sat in his office staring at his reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows. He had built his company from the ground up, fought for every deal, every contract. He knew success came with challenges, but he never expected to become a target. The idea that powerful interests had tried to erase him from the industry wasn't just frustrating, it was personal. Jordan stepped in, her voice softer than usual. "You know this isn't over, right?" Malcolm nodded. "They don't lose quietly. They regroup, shift tactics. This isn't just about me anymore. It's about everyone who's ever been told to stay in their place." She hesitated. "So what now?" Malcolm looked down at the folder of documents, then back at the city skyline. The battle had just begun. He wasn't going to play defense. He was going to expose everything. "They wanted to put me under a microscope," he said, his voice steady. "Then let's put them under one. And this time they wouldn't be able to control the narrative."